So welcome to everybody, the last session of this long day. A couple of words of these new, let's say, topics that we have introduced in FSA meetings, at least here in Rome, about the Roman coinage. David will explain why. Let me say only these two words about the last meeting of our 9th General Conference about leadership. You know, there will be this one because I learned from Robert that FSA tried to put together academics, but also people coming from different, let's say, areas of human doing, let's say, and try to create a new kind of understanding of each other. And we thought that this aspect, I mean, leadership, soft skills, this must be integrated also in when you try to be a learned and an academician. Let me add something that I want to say only here. It often happens that there is this distinction between be a good academic and not good in any other else. This I don't like, honestly. I think that now it's time to change a bit this anthropology. In a good sense, not destroying the beauty, but we do a kind of experiment, okay? So that's why we have introduced, and there will be a very, I think, very learned also speech by Luigi Miraglia, who has accepted to stay with us even in this very new experiment. So I took even too much time. David will speak about coinage, inflation, debasement, and politics. And please, David, come here.
Thank you, Francesco. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We have a little bit to the morning, although not that much. Many thanks to everyone making this conference possible, as well tuning into my reflections on Roman coinage, inflation, debasement, and politics. I've been a numismatist for, well, you guys are soon to start doing some math, for almost 54 years. Something started introduced to me by my father, who's deceased, and primarily focused on Judean and American coinage. Next year's topic, should we all be able, will be on Judean and Roman coinage at the behest of Francesco. The etymon of numismatic is via Latin from the Greek nomisma, so you're going to have to pardon me because I do not know Greek or Latin, so if you're welcome. When you read the Torah on Saturday morning, there are people who correct your pronunciation. So I will not be offended. I'm accustomed to being corrected. So if I mispronounce the Greek or the Latin, please just shout it out. It won't be offensive. I've got thick skin. So anyway, I'll try to make my way through that. So nomisma, nomismat, from current coin, from nomitsen, use currently. Again, apologies for any mispronunciations there. I'm sure there will be plenty through here. Inflation for the moment appears to be relaxing a bit in the US if you pay attention to the data and statistics. And egg prices, the source of many Americans' attention over the last year or so, continue to evidence volatility, primarily due to bird flu, avian flu, along with stock market indices and commodities. Interestingly enough, many Americans are not focused on gas prices, which have been quite reasonable. This has percolated my thoughts about inflation, monetary policy, and politics. Admittedly, this wanders from anything directly relevant to ancient coin and into a sidetrack and wishful thinking for modern politics. However, inflation is not a contemporary phenomenon, rather an ancient one. Aes rude, or aes infectum, Latin for rough bronze, this is an aes rude, the oldest, on the frontispiece here, the oldest known Roman currency. And these were typically bronze nuggets used as proto-currency in ancient Italy. The earliest known pieces of AS rood date back to the 8th century BCE and continue to be used into the 4th century BCE. As I said, the frontispiece of this presentation has an image of an AS rood fragment found in central Italy dating back to around the 5th to 4th centuries BCE, approximately the time of the early Roman Republic. Successor to the AS rood proto-currency are to the right in this next picture, specifically an AS signatum left and an AS grave right on the right, so you can see that. Originally, sheep and cattle were generally traded as the main assets of value. Metal pieces of bronze carried significant advantages, namely much smaller, easier to transport, and not subject to spoilage. There was no standardization of size and weight for these lumpy bronze units, and pieces needed to be weighed for each transaction. Early Roman laws, such as the Lex Aeteria Tarpeia, were among the first to allow bronze as payment for fines originally intended to be paid in oxen and sheep. Early Roman Republic, 4th century BCE, fantastic cast bronze, AS formatum, formed in the shape of an animal in profile, extremely interesting and very rare. So to put sort of a couple of things, these are not very expensive pieces from a value numismatic perspective today. The one thing that's tricky is authentication, so I would not advise you to go buy in a shop because there are many, so to speak, fake ones or ones. So, and numismatics over my life is morphed into professional grading companies grading coins and authenticating them. So I would not go, someone could pass off, you can go out here and pass off something. It wouldn't be bronze maybe, but you could pass it off as currency. So anyway, this is formed in the shape of an animal in profile. So this coin, if you will, the AS formatum, this specific one, is probably 3 times more expensive than the previous ones, just to put a little perspective on it. So maybe today, maybe $400 or $500 for a genuine one. The pieces before, maybe $150, $200 for those. So not extraordinary. Again, authentication is more important. This particular piece is very interesting. It's very rare. Again, not too expensive, but 53 millimeters, by the way, for those of you. Many think in European terms. For those who think in inches, that's 2 1/16 inch, and this weighs approximately 23.36 grams. In reality, I think you can sort of see it. I try to capture it. It has a nice olive green patina with the earthen deposits. It's named AS Fortum by Haberlin. This very rare bronze currency was a precursor to the issues of the AS grave, but later than AS rood. This one's from a Spanish private collection. Gradually, AS rood evolved into more sophisticated forms of currency. AS signatum was introduced in the 5th century BCE, also cast in bronze as ingots with standardized weights and a government seal. The first Roman coin, known as AS grave, appeared in 269 BCE. You can now see, so the AS grave is to the right. The AS signatum, which was first, is to the left. Silver coins in the Roman imperial period ranged from nearly pure, so I'm going to really quickly, well, I'll go back. The AS signatum was introduced in the 5th century BCE, also cast in bronze ingots and standardized weights. The first coin, known as the AS grave, appeared in 269 BCE, so I think that's a repeat. I apologize. Anyway, silver coins in the Roman imperial period ranged from nearly pure silver, so greater than 95% purity, to barely any silver, less than 5%, as the coinage evolved from 1st to 3rd century AD. The average weight of coins also changed. So Kevin Butcher, a noted numismatist and researcher, provides an interesting overview of the evolution of thinking about debasement of Roman coins in the 3rd century, especially with the introduction of the Antonaeus by Caracalla. Butcher seeds doubt about the easiest interpretation, linking debasement to inflation and currency collapse. Butcher also notes, and this is something that we are somewhat subject to here, Butcher also notes the risk of contemporary context influencing our understanding of the past, a risk I may step into fully before the end of this presentation. So in this particular essay, I've not ventured to furnish yet another opinion about the consequences of debasement or on the value of the Antoninus. That was not the point of the exercise, instead trying to show an account of the development of thoughts about the third century debasements. There are many open questions about the relationship between metal content and value. There are reasons other than inflation for why metal content of the coins changed over time. That is, profit for the state as well. Drivers of inflation other than lower metal content of coins, that is, a greater abundance of coins as you start to mint them. There's many more available. It's worth keeping in mind, if there was high inflation in the period from 215 to 260, the Romans seem to have been uninterested in recording it. Hard evidence in the form of price data does not match the period of debasement. The reduced use of silver in Roman coins over time is easy to see in hand if we look between the extremes of Augustus' reign, 27 BC to 14 AD, and Gallienus, AD 253 to 268. In this next, here. So this is an example of that coin, and this is a nice. Something's missing. This is not. So I don't know how. So this should be before that one. So this is a coin, an early one. It's greater than 95% silver and weighs about 3.86 grams from the 1st century AD. Then we go back. I apologize for this. No. Why is it? So this one, I apologize. I know exactly, sorry. So this is one of the most common coins that collectors, if you're going to start collecting ancient coins, the denarius. I do actually have one of these that's graded in fine condition. This is not an example of mine, but this is a very popular from 1st century BC. Very high grade silver, about 4 grams. One of the things to note, this is well struck. That's very important from a numismatist perspective. Centering of the strike, the full strike, and the edge increase the value in the grading, and ancient coins are graded a little differently, usually a scale of 5 to 1, 5 being what they consider uncirculated, and 1, I don't know, I don't have any 1s, I wouldn't spend too much time on a 1. But so this is a beautiful example of the denarius. And then you have, in the 1st century AD, moving to this one's a little better than 95% silver, the Antoninus here. And then so you can read, I won't read. So this is an Antoninus, getting ahead of ourselves. So 1st century AD, you've got this example here. And we see that 2nd century, we're starting to see a diminution in the purity of the silver, around 80%, a little bit lighter. And then now we start to see in the 3rd century from Gallienus, this is the so-called double denarius, which is interesting because one would think if you go back to the example before of the denarius, that was of a high-grade silver, a beautiful coin. This is a double denarius, which does not mean double in value because there's very little silver content in this particular piece. So looks can be a bit deceiving. And then you've got this this coin. And you've got this coin looks, there may be a 3rd century silver coin, again from the Galenius period, but this coin has a very thin layer of silver. When you...
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Why do you say it shows little visible silver content?
Be-
The content is what?
So it's over the top.
Over the top.
It's sort of a glazing, if you will, very thin layer. So then you start to move through to the Aurelian, so 8270 to 275. There's no silver content in this coin. There's no silver content. And then moving to even further, right? No silver content in the probus. So 276 to 282. Yeah, it's so it's almost, if you look at the coin, if you know like I'm trying to think, like almost like a steel, kind of, steel that's been rusted a little bit, it almost has that look to it. I mean, and then when you feel and hold them, you can really tell a difference. I mean, the earlier coins, with 95% silver content, you can really tell, it has some substantive to it, it's got some weight, and it feels a little different. So this, here's a graph of the table, the Harrow graph, which is Great Debasement and Reform from AD 193 to 305. It's interesting to note, we've got a lot of technology today to be able to tell silver content, and some of the data here is based on this next graph, Haynes. It's a 1941 graph, by the way. That is before my time, by the way, just as a note. But based on data from Hammer in 1908. This hasn't been updated, which sort of shows that people aren't maybe so interested in it. But today we can get a lot more exacting. You can literally go into, so one of my side businesses or things I do is bullion. So you can go in, there's an instrument, it's about $28,000, $30,000. You can put any metal on there. It will tell you the content. It's absolutely amazing, but no one's really done that with it. This study is very, very old, but it still shows the point, and it's interesting to note the decline in silver content over time if you follow the line. And then you have bless you, then you have a jump to 95%. If you see there toward the end there, a 95% representing the introduction of the Argentus. So this is, well, should be, although the Argentus was introduced by Diocletian in his money reform of 294 AD, it was not really a return to the silver denarii. Silver wash coins were the more common currency at this period. This large particular sample here is 26 millimeters. It's about 11.3 grams. Only a very small hint of silver on the surface, and it was intended to replace the Antonesis. Now you have, in Diocletian's reform, the Argentus, which is the one I was referring to, where the silver spiked way up all of a sudden. You have a very high silver content. Starting to see some faces being promoted a little bit more, a little clearer. And then the imagery, I know, Francesco, you're interested in the imagery. I've got some detail there on the imagery you can see. So from a perspective, so coins have a face, they have a obverse, OBV, and they have a reverse, so REV. Try to capture the writing and the imagery, and then they're referenced in books. I mean, there's a number of books that reference them. So in his reform of the Argentus and Aureus, we start to see gold come in, gold coins, but they only played a real subsidiary role, pretty rare in this period. I don't have it here because I know it's sort of not really inconsistent with the presentation, but Julius Caesar issued gold coins to pay his soldiers, and they're pretty rare in amazing, the history is amazing, but some of these soldiers were fighting abroad for 2 and 3 years, and they got a fortune in gold, 50. I mean, the coins are very small from a gold content perspective, and you go to sell it for the gold content, you wouldn't get the gold content, but back in that day, I mean, some became very wealthy. Of course, they were gone for a long period of time, but I do have one of those because of the historic significance. One came up for sale. They're sort of hard to come by, but I have one in well-centered, full, and it was just inconsistent with this because the gold coins aren't so much as popular. So this visualization compares the causes of death of Roman emperors, which are the dots along there, against the weight of silver and Roman currency. So you can see the axes there. Yeah, I was a bit reluctant to present this chart. I think the appeal, it was more, it's sort of intriguing, and it's a nice graphic or shows some things, but I couldn't get the data points. This is from the Money Project, by the way. I couldn't get the data points. It's hard to confirm where they're getting their data, but it sort of illustrates what I wanted to illustrate there. Another visualization from the visual capitalists. It was one of my favorite sources. It's really cool if you want to check it out. The visual capitalists, they do all kinds of visualizations. I wish I was capable of doing it. But this sort of reinforces the link to hyperinflation and the collapse that Butcher mentioned earlier in the presentation. So you can see here what's going on with the silver over the time. And then this slide, also created by the visual capitalists as part of the same presentation, has been included to stimulate some thought on, we like to stimulate thought here, right? We like to think on wages, ancient and contemporary, as well the consequences of the aforementioned diminution of value. So it's another dreaded C word among some of the younger folks, commitment being the other, along with communication. It's sort of a triad of C words that our youth have challenges with communication and making a commitment and consequences anyhow. So one of the questions you may ask, how are the coins plated? Actually, I'll reverse. So I know, Francesco, you had something about, had asked before when we were discussing this, minting, and how are these minted. So most of them were done by either the emperors or high-ranking officers in the army. And they were actually hand like blanks or palette. They had, blanks, but they're actually hand with a tap and hand done. So you get them, there's no consistency. I mean, a mint today, the mints across the world, today it's very mechanized, right? It's very perfect. You get perfect coins, right? These are not, and that's why the more valuable ones are the ones that are well-centered, right? And you see the full image, and it pops. It's got like a three-dimensionality to it. So that's what, for the mints was either the emperor did it or high-ranking, they did have high-ranking army who did their coins. So anyway, you may ask, this is fascinating to me because and appeals to the scientist in me with a little background in chemistry, but how are the plated coins made in ancient times where there were multiple processes potentially used to make plated counterfeit and official coins throughout time? So there was counterfeiting going on. When you don't have a centralized mint making coins, I mean, you have the emperor making coins, or you have high-ranking army making coins. I mean, it sort of opens itself up to counterfeiting. So anyway, while there are several candidates for silver plating in ancient Rome, there is uncertainty about the process used for late Roman coins. Here are several candidates that are mentioned throughout some references, but so diffusion bonding or Sheffield plating, silver copper sheets heated together reported in use for Roman Republican forae denarii, wrap copper flan in a silver foil and they heat it. This is considered too labor-intensive to have been used at scale in late Roman Empire, but we do see them. The other one is, if you could imagine, I can't imagine this, dipping in silver chloride, if you can imagine. Silver chloride is a toxic substance, by the way. Blanks were maintained hot, then they were dipped in that silver chloride and then cooled in a bath. The other one, so this is mercury silvering, so amalgam plating or fire gilding. A good way to get mercury poisoning, dissolve silver and mercury, then spread on the flan like peanut butter, and then evaporate the mercury with heat. This technique is mentioned as a possibility for late Roman coins. As you can imagine, the people making the coins suffered from a number of ailments and things. The other is, bless you, is depleting, silvering, pickling, or blanching. So they take a copper silver alloy, use citric acid or vinegar, vinegar would be, to leach out the copper and enrich, you enhance the silver content of the outer surface so it gives it a nice little flashy look. Then strike it to produce the plating, which seems to there's a little bit of a hypothesis about that for later Roman coins. Anyhow, ancient technology was surprisingly sophisticated. Included plows, irrigation, wheels, textiles, aqueducts, writing, ships, complex construction, and most relevant for this discussion, metallurgy of gold, silver, copper, and bronze. Of note is the fact that many of the aforementioned techniques utilize chemical mixtures definitively hazardous to one's health. Bolos of Mendes in the 2nd century BC describes method for producing false silver. Sort of interesting, the alchemist kind of, the alchemist interplay or what have you, right? I think we've touched upon that. I don't think I've heard anything to this session, but I know last year there were some things about that. About the making of uncoined, the quicksilver from arsenic or sand arch, as you prefer, cook it as usual, deposit it on copper or coppered iron, and it will be whitened. Whitened magnesia does the same thing, and transmuted arsenic and cooked cadmia, zinc oxide, and unfired sandric and whitened pyrite, and smithsonium, so lead acetate cooked with sulfur. It's amazing chemistry kind of thing. Anyhow, giving into the tendency to make parallels between ancient Rome and the current environment, this graph of the decline in purchasing power of the U.S. dollar is intriguing. And unfortunately, it goes to 2021. I couldn't find a more current graph. But is there a parallel between the debasement of currency in Rome and the loss of buying power in the U.S.? Will congressional leaders whose primary objective seems to be to shut down the U.S. government to win political points, to spoil U.S. institutions and usher in a period like that which followed the end of the Roman Empire? These are questions I think you have to somewhat consider or ask. Decline in currency leads to inflation, leads to a lack of trust in institutions. Is this too simplistic an explanation? Certainly the metal content of coins is not the same as the value of coins. Nevertheless, perhaps it is fair to conclude that a bit of thoughtfulness in leading a country through periods of inflation is a good choice. A couple of George Bernard Shaw quotes that are often combined strike me as both inspiring and a form of advice and admonishment to the feverish, selfish little clods of ailments and grievances that seem to be having a moment of political empowerment recently. Please accept my sincere apology in advance for the deviation from the ancient Middle Ages and Renaissance scholars. I'm sure you have some things you could fold into here, features in it as an integral part of this conference, but the germ of Shaw's philosophy of life may be found in these words. I'm of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live it, it is a privilege to do for it whatsoever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I have got hold of for the moment. I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. This is the true story, another George Bernard Shaw quote. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being thoroughly worn out before you are thrown on the scrap heap, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Although a bit off topic, one of my go-to George Bernard Shaw quotes is on communication, or the lack thereof, and I think it's sort of apropos in our modern times. He has said the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I am concerned with so many distractions and an inability to communicate in a world overwhelmed by noise. This also presents challenges for authentic leaders, not so for leaders with certain dispositions, temperaments, suffering psychological afflictions. And thank you for your attention during the course of this presentation. My wish is to stimulate thinking on thinking, as well dialogue around contemporary issues. More importantly, I wish you and your loved ones many years of good health, love, joy, laughter, and memory making. Peace and cheers.
Thank you, David. Now, there are questions. Yeah, sorry.
David, that was absolutely splendid. Thank you so much. Well, no, I'm going to be quite cruel. I'd like to ask about a comment on one of your slides related to Caracalla, where he said, nobody should have any money but I. And do you think that applies now? I'm thinking of two particular individuals in the leadership of nations.
So my thoughts would be, yeah, I think there are rhythms with that quote today. You have a massive consolidation of wealth that by a very small percentage of people. And I think it was Alessandra who put up a slide yesterday with 10 billionaires and they were in the U.S. So and most primarily Caucasian. I think there were 2 Indian billionaires, but or was that you? I'm sorry, I apologize. Chris did that. So anyhow, you start to look. I mean, that's another. I mean, again, that's you can branch off into. I mean, there could be a whole session on that, the amassing of wealth and how that's changed over time. I think there's been a significant consolidation there. So.
More questions? Please, Chris.
Uh-oh. The Reese are coming after me. I guess I deserve that.
Not at all.
It's okay.
Mike, did Gresham's law obtain during the Roman period?
Say it again.
Sorry?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Did Gresham's law,
bad
money driving out good money?
Yeah, that would be an interesting, you might want to elucidate on Gresham's law.
Well, very simply put, that bad money drives out good money.
Yes.
Gresham's law.
Gresham. There's a law, Gresham's law.
Much later than the Roman period, Sir Thomas Gresham, in the 16th century, articulated this law that bad money drives out good money. And I think that's what was being demonstrated. But.
Well, yeah, I mean, that could be that's a good observation. I appreciate that, yeah. Yeah, I would prefer, I mean, today, I mean, gold is setting records. It's been very volatile this year, but yeah, it would be, if I was to advise you on collecting, I would not collect copper, nickel. I would focus on coins that have some kind of intrinsic metal value, primarily silver, gold, platinum. Platinum and palladium coins are somewhat ridiculously priced. I mean, you have to know how to acquire them. I do know, this is not a pitch for my businesses, but I do make make a business in coin collecting and in bullion. I mean, I've had people during certain economic periods come to me and want to move significant amounts of cash into hard assets, which is amazing. So I would also say that as a point of advice to don't take a certificate, take physical delivery of things. I mean, there are a lot of companies that offer you storage and they'll issue a piece of paper and you present the piece of paper and don't take physical storage. I mean, that may require you to buy a safe or have a safe deposit box or do something, but I would advise you take physical delivery of your metal and bullions. Don't rely on the paper. I mean, I know for a fact J.P. Morgan Chase was going through an audit of some of the metals that they thought they owned, and a substantial, not right, so barrels or what have you. I don't know where they're kept. I don't know that, but amongst numismatists and things, the barrels did not contain what they thought they contained. You don't read about that, and there's no footnote in their financial statements about that, by the way, just so you know. And you've got to watch the coins who you're bullion and things. You need to watch who you're buying stuff from. There's a host of, it's unfortunate today, a host of gold ingots and bullion that are being counterfeited, and I don't mean this as primarily out of China. Actually, Chinese are also, and they've been doing this for a while, it's not a new thing, but so today's market is slabbed coins, particularly, ancient coins can be slabbed too, but it's a different thing. But so PCGS and NGC are the primary grading societies, professional grading societies, so they verify the authentication, but they're actually, we see slabs that are counterfeit. You can look them up. So both those grading, and they have a vast inventory, so you can type in the number and verify that that's a real coin that's been verified, because they're now keeping digital library. There's Gold Shield, and they actually now have a digital record of that particular coin. So it's amazing what they do. It's highly scientific. They're looking at the surfaces, three-dimensionality, the surfaces, and that's all recorded for that specific coin. So, because a lot of people want to try to upgrade their coin or try to play this game too, like, oh, the coin should be a higher, and there's cases of it, older. Coin grading has gone through its periods of conservatism and liberalism and things. So there are some older coins that have been slabbed that they were very, very conservative in the grading. So it may be common to break them out of the slab anyhow.
Yeah, thank you for such an interesting lecture. I once did work on I don't know if you know, the pseudo-Platonic Eryxias, which goes through different supposed Socrates goes through different types of coins, or money, really, from different areas. And the most interesting for me was his work on his mention of the Phoenicians. He claimed that they have, their coin was an unknown or uncertified object bound in leather, and past people didn't open. You couldn't open it. If you opened it, then it lost its value. Yeah. Yeah, and this passed around. But that led me on to wonder, and I never found an answer to that. How were the coins bundled or carried in the Roman world? Because often in films, Hollywood films or whatever, people come in with this little bundle of coins, and generally the asses, and they throw it on the table, and people say, "Oh yes, that's very good." But how do they know what's inside it?
I think that is authentically the way. They carry like a little pouch made of leather or material, maybe linen or something. But yeah, I don't know about throwing it down.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when it comes to the sestertii, for instance, especially in Cicero, then they mention the price of objects being like thousands of sestertii. So people carry around a bundle of 2,000 sesterti for buying a house or whatever, and how do you know if you're the buyer? How does he know? Is he actually count each one of them?
So probably in that case, you'd probably have a box. I mean, I think a box. You'd probably have a box, a wooden box that would contain that, and they would count. I mean, they would count them. I'm sure. I mean, so.
This is probably a question that only a philosopher would ask. Why is silver content a measure of value? What I mean is this, that actually silver, and for that matter gold, have no intrinsic value. They're practically worthless. It's because they're soft and shiny, so so people like them. So I'm a little puzzled. And I guess one way of getting at it is that money is worth, a unit of money is worth whatever you can buy with it. So as long as, well, which brings me back to my original question, I guess, why does the silver content matter?
So it has to, I mean, it's interesting because you see the purer, probably the better it would hold up. So silver is somewhat of a finicky, I mean, I'm sure folks have experience with silver. It tarnishes and, you know, it sort of breaks down or what have you. But so you had started with, we have attributed value to gold, silver. I think it's interesting, and it's a good question. It's actually, I'm going to do a little bit of research, go down a rabbit hole maybe a little bit, not here and now, but it's interesting to see how you move from bronze to going to silver and then gold. Now gold, I will tell you, gold has properties where it does not really, it maintains its sheen and it maintains certain properties and attributes that are, make it a little bit more appealing. It's much more expensive. I mean, you just look today, I mean, I didn't look at what gold and silver closed at, but let's just say roughly an ounce of gold is $3,400, an ounce of silver is maybe $32, $33. Don't quote me because I haven't looked recently. But so the other thing too, an ounce of silver, just as a matter of is a little smaller than this, and probably about yay thick. An ounce of gold is, from a storage perspective, is minuscule compared. I mean, you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars of gold in a bar. I mean, as opposed to the silver would be, you'd have to have, you know, a truck to be the equivalent. So, but it's interesting how that's come about, right? So there's a general ratio, and the ratios have gotten really askew in the last. A lot of stock traders and investment managers and things, which is another area of familiarity to me. The last few years, maybe since COVID, I'm not exactly sure, so don't quote me, but the analysts and things rely on historic data to look forward, which is a fault of modeling, but because we're not seeing those patterns being repeated. Typically, if we see the stock market fall, or historically speaking, if we see the stock market fall, the commodities go up. That's a typical pattern. The other pattern is sort of a ratio of silver to gold is 80 to 1. So the silver price 80 times the gold price 80 times the silver price. We're not seeing those patterns over the last few years, and we're also not seeing. Silver should be, there's no reason for it, but silver is probably undervalued. That is not investment advice.
David, you are giving.
But it's probably undervalued. I mean, it should probably be trading in the high 30s, low 40s, and it's mystifying people as to why that is. And then, so then to get into platinum, platinum is another one. There's a shortage of platinum around the world, and platinum is going into a lot of EVs in other vehicles, and it's a fundamental part of your catalytic converter. So if you go to replace your catalytic converter, the reason your catalytic converter is so valuable is it has platinum in it. And there are people who will steal, well, but there are people who were at one point in time stealing catalytic converters, which is not a fun thing to come out to your car and find it doesn't have the catalytic converter. But anyway, the platinum is not behaving necessarily the way it should be behaving, and I'm not sure why that is. So I do track and read about that, but coming to 2025, there's supposed to be a shortage of platinum. But the United States just announced an interest in the DRC, which I find fascinating because they have been uninterested in DRC in the past. Democratic Republic of the Congo. I don't want to get into politics of that, but anyway. What else?
Other questions? I have a small question, David. As far as you know,
guys.
once the Romans conquered countries, what's about the means of the other countries? Do you know this? What
Worthless.
did happen? For example, Romans and
Worthless.
Jewish...
Worthless. Complete deflation.
Complete inflation. Really?
I'm not sure. I would guess, knowing the Romans, I mean, that's just a guess, and no offense to anyone, but.
No, everything's fine. All of us have read A.H.M. Jones, you know, with the late Roman Empire, at some point or another. Jones made the argument that the decrease in the value of Roman currency had a lot to do with the overextension of the Roman military and the amount of money they had to spend on limes or fortresses across North Africa and the Danube and the Rhine. And just think of all the imperial wars that were fought in the 3rd, 2nd centuries and such. So you wanted to mark some parallels between ancient inflation and devaluation and modern inflation and devaluation. Do you think there's some parallel on military budgets and well, also think of Rome as the social welfare state they had, and they had to sustain that. So are there parallels there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good point, and I didn't really take it further. Again, I was trying to, despite wandering off in a few different directions, trying to keep it rather sort of focused. But I think that's a very good point. And that's one of their causality for the Roman Empire. And Caesar came in with, I mentioned the gold coin. That was one of the first gold coins issued from Caesar. And he had conquered, the gold was amassed from the conquering that they had done. But he had soldiers who hadn't been home or gotten paid for years. And he did pay them in these gold coins. And they became extraordinarily wealthy. I mean, it's interesting to see that.
Any other questions? Well, start hoarding your gold, boys and girls. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your bearing with me.
We succeed, no? This is
So the concert will be 7:30 in the room next doors, also known to you as the Timaeus room.
I think that's a great question.
you.